President Trump says that Walmart and China should eat the cost of tariffs instead of passing them on to consumers. This was President Trump responding after Walmart announced that it would have to increase prices because of Trump's trade war. In a Truth Social post, the president writing, quote, Walmart should stop trying to blame tariffs as a reason for raising prices. He then suggests that Walmart and China eat the tariffs and that he and consumers will be watching. Let's discuss with Gerald Storch. He's a former CEO of Toys R Us and the former vice chairman of Target. Gerald, thanks so much for being with us. Is it realistic for retailers to simply eat the cost of tariffs without passing some of it off to consumers?
Well, I give President Trump credit for using the bully pulpit. I mean, that's a normal thing to do. And maybe on the margin, it'll make people pause about how much they increase prices. But what we're really looking at here is a situation where costs are going to go up. So eventually prices have to follow. If Mattel raises the price of Barbie to take into account the fact that they're made in China and tariffs are, they were triple digits a while ago. Now they're still at least 30% or more. So that's too much for a retailer not to pass some of it on. I think what bothered President Trump probably was all the headlines coming out of Walmart's earnings release, where the headlines kind of didn't take into account the fact that it's not prices going up on everything Walmart sells. In fact, I'd say 3/4 of what Walmart sells isn't even sourced by countries that have tariffs. Most of it's domestic, things like food and, et cetera. But for certain products, there's absolutely no doubt that the costs are going to go up. And if Walmart doesn't pass the prices on, that means that it's trying to gain sort of market share, which Walmart does. Is that going to be a good thing? Because you have a few big retailers, Walmart, Costco, TJX, and Amazon, that are eating up all the market share in retail anyway. And if they use their market clout now not to take price increases, where does that put the mom and pop retailer down the street? Puts them out of business.
Yeah, it would have a huge impact. There is part of the public, though, that sides with Trump's view of this, in part because they feel that corporations have elevated prices for profit, especially during the pandemic or via other avenues, say like shrinkflation, where they offer less product for more money. What do you say to folks who are fearful of price gouging?
Well, I don't think we're going to see that. I do believe that the free market works. I think that most people believe that the best thing government can do is set the rules, whatever those rules are, however strict they are, antitrust rules, regulations, taxes, tariffs, and then get out of the way. Keep them the same for a long period of time so there's not uncertainty, and let people play the game. If you do that, you're going to see prices as low as possible, and there can't be price gouging because other retailers would simply undercut their prices. So that's not a viable long-term strategy to try to gouge consumers. And so I think, part of what's going on here is that in the first Trump presidency, there were tariff increases on China and other places. And those, when you look at the history of it, were by and large eaten at the source by the manufacturers, a teeny bit by the retailers, but something like 87% of them were not passed along to consumers. But that's because the tariffs were relatively small. When you're dealing with 15 to 20%, that's a reasonable possibility. When you're dealing with tariffs we're talking about now, these reciprocal tariffs, these very high numbers, there's no way that can happen without them being passed on to consumers. Certainly over the long term, it's got to happen. It will happen on the products that are affected. Again, it's not everything, but in the products with the heavy tariffs where there aren't substitutes, prices will go up.
Do you foresee the major retailers reconsidering their sourcing decisions for some of these products? Do you think that these tariffs might have some of the aspirational intent that the administration has put on them, that they will refocus manufacturing, resurge manufacturing domestically in the United States?
Absolutely. I think that it will. But the issue is, it isn't, I'm not going to get into was it a good idea or not to have tariffs? The issue is how it was executed. When you talk to people, even people who are big supporters of President Trump, on this one they think, even if they agree, the concept is, okay, that we don't want everything made in China, we need to have domestic manufacturing. The magnitude of these tariffs is simply too high, and the execution was totally botched. Let's be honest here. The timing of this, you couldn't possibly move all that manufacturing back to the U.S. instantly, just like that. And the breadth across every country in the world, and across all these product groups, you can't move that fast. The idea may have merit. The concept of doing it all at once has no merit at all. If I were doing this, I would have put together a much more comprehensive plan over a period of years and said, look, we want things to happen faster. We're going to tell you what we're going to do in advance. We're going to raise taxes, not right now, but in 6 months it'll start. In a year it'll be heavier. A year from that it'll go up unless we see the kind of progress that we want to see. That would give people time to adapt. Right now, for a lot of these products, take the Barbie doll example. Mattel can't move that manufacturing to the U.S. There's nowhere to make the dolls. So it can't happen for a number of years. And with the kind of constantly shifting stands that are happening now, both within the current administration, the possibility you'd have a different administration a few years down the line, you'd be a fool to make that kind of investment at this stage. So we're lacking the certainty that business needs to make proper decisions.
You mentioned Mattel and Barbie specifically a couple times, and it strikes me that the president has threatened specifically to put tariffs on Mattel for statements that company made about tariffs and the impact that it would have on consumers. Trump also recently made this comment about kids getting 2 dolls instead of 30. I had mentioned your experience leading Toys R Us. I wonder how you see the toy industry being impacted by all of this, in part because right now is when retailers are getting ready to make those orders for Christmas time, right? For Christmas shopping. So I wonder, are our kids going to see fewer toys? Are our parents going to see fewer toys on the shelves?
Well, it's inevitable at this stage you're going to see higher prices. It's also most likely that you're going to see shortages of the hottest products because retailers are being very careful and manufacturers about how much they bring in under a high tariff regimen. Why? Because it could change tomorrow and tariffs could be lower. So don't bring in now with higher tariffs when it might be lower later. So that runs the risk that the supply chains, which are always difficult in terms of predicting the hot toy and getting the right one on the shelf at the right time, that those are going to be a little snarled here or messed up by the fact that you're making decisions with more uncertainty than before, and hence more variability, and hence more out of stocks as well. So there's no doubt there's going to be issues. It doesn't mean that parents won't buy children something for Christmas. We all know that they will. The issue is what's it going to be. And you can get mad at specific manufacturers if you want to, but the reality is the toy industry moved to China a long time ago, before many other industries did, and it's essentially headquartered in China right now. There are some products made in the U.S., and that's great, but there isn't enough manufacturing capacity to move all of that back to the U.S. in the short term. It could happen eventually if you have robotic factories. Lego makes a lot of their product in Denmark, which costs more to manufacturing as an environment than the U.S. does, but it's a heavily robotic factory. I've been there and I've seen it. We don't have those in the U.S., and they take years to build. So we have to know what the rules are going to be for the long term. If that's the way it's going to be, high tariff regimen on China, you can start to shift the manufacturing back and build these multi-$100 million factories, highly robotic, to manufacture the product in the U.S. That's just not here now. That's not real. It's not now. It's not today. Yeah. So all these products are made overseas, and they're going to continue to be made overseas in the near term.
Gerald Storch, fascinating to get your perspective. Thanks.
My pleasure.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is calling on America's trading partners to reach a deal with the United States or watch tariff rates go back up. Bessent tells CNN that President Trump has put these countries on notice and that they have 90 days to make a deal happen. Meanwhile, President Trump has a stark warning for companies considering hiking their costs: eat the tariffs or pay the price. That's what he says.
All right, let's go to CNN business and politics correspondent Vanessa Yurkevich. Vanessa, Trump's tariffs are driving up costs for American companies. So what else can they do but raise prices for consumers?
Pamela, the only other thing they can do is to move their manufacturing out of China, which many retailers like Walmart have said that they've been trying to do for years now, but it's not that quickly. It doesn't happen overnight. So Walmart's saying that they are going to have to raise prices on some of their products, including electronics, toys, and food. But to that, President Trump writing this weekend on Truth Social saying that Walmart made billions of dollars last year, far more than expected. Between Walmart and China, they should, as is said, eat the tariffs and not charge valued customers anything. He says, I'll be watching. This is not the first company that has said that they have to raise prices. Mattel, the maker of Barbie and Polly Pocket, saying that they're going to have to raise prices because of the products that they import from China. The company also saying that they can't produce toys here in America. The president responding saying that he's going to put 100% tariff on the toys that Mattel imports from China. That, of course, though, would just raise prices even more. And the president saying over the weekend that he's putting pressure on 150 countries to come to the table and make deals. Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, saying that they're negotiating with 18 countries. But just look at that. Just 2 trade deals or agreements made so far. One with the UK, but that 10% universal tariff is still in place with the UK. And then, of course, with China, that sort of agreement or deal, a 30% tariff now on Chinese exports instead of 145%. But that ticking clock, guys, that July 9th deadline, that's when that 90-day pause is over for those higher reciprocal tariffs. The administration putting pressure on other countries to come to the table with deals or risk higher tariffs. Pamela Wolf?
Vanessa Yurkevich, thank you very, very much.